Peppa Pig, the forest, with no way out. It was a quiet, cloudy day, light but without sun. A thin, almost invisible mist hovered above the ground. The pig family decided to have a picnic near the forest. Daddy Pig found a large clearing among sparse trees. The grass was soft and dry. Everything felt peaceful. On the blanket were sandwiches, fruit, and a thermos of tea. Peppa was blowing soap bubbles. George played with his toy dinosaur. Time moved slowly and comfortably. A white butterfly fluttered by. It circled above the clearing and vanished into the trees. George ran after it. Peppa followed. They took only a few steps. The ground was dry, leaves rustled under their feet. They stopped near a bush and turned around. The clearing was gone. No sign of their parents. Only forest behind them. The trees stood closer together now. The branches wove into each other overhead, shutting out the sky. The sound faded. Even their footsteps were quiet, as if the ground itself was muffling them. Peppa and George turned back, but every step brought them to the same places, the same stump, the same stone, the same tree with a scratch mark. Time passed. The light dimmed. The forest seemed aware of them. The branches pressed closer. The air turned cold. They found a stream, narrow like a thread. Its water flowed in both directions at once. Peppa bent down to drink, but saw her reflection. It didn't move. It just stared. They ran, stumbled. George cried without sound. The forest swallowed even their emotions. Suddenly it was night, no sunset, no warning, just darkness, thick and heavy. Small lights flickered between the trees, soft, yellow. Peppa led George toward them. Another clearing, a picnic blanket, a basket, just like before. But the grass was burned, the tree limbs overhead charred. The thermos held water. George's toy cracked as if someone had stepped on it. They stepped closer. The blanket was wet, the basket empty. Their footprints lay in the dirt, scattered, leading in all directions, as if they had already been here many times. A rustle, a figure among the trees, a shape like Mummy Pig. It didn't move, just stood. Peppa stepped forward. The figure vanished into the woods. They followed. Branches scraped their skin. The darkness thickened. The figure was gone again. The forest, unchanged, everything repeating. Days may have passed, or hours. Peppa no longer ran, George no longer played. They simply walked. Nowhere, no exit. They sat by a large stone. The stone was warm, as if someone had just left it. Carved into it, a circle and two dots. A face, smiling. No sun, no moon, just gray light. Peppa closed her eyes. George stared ahead at the path. The white butterfly returned, but now it was black. Peppa Pig, lost episode, silence. It started with a rasp. In the morning, Peppa tried to call George, but her voice came out weak, as if she had a cold. Mummy Pig gave her some warm tea. Everyone thought it would pass, but by evening, Peppa's voice had almost vanished. She tried to speak, but her words barely came out, like something was pressing on her throat from the inside. Sometimes her mouth moved, but no sound followed. She tried to laugh, but it was just an open mouth and silence. The next day, Peppa could no longer speak at all. She understood everything, nodded, gestured, but not even a whisper escaped. The family grew worried. Doctors came, but found nothing wrong. Her throat was perfectly healthy. And yet, Peppa was changing. She grew quieter in every way, her footsteps, her movements, even her breathing. At night, it was as if she made no sound at all. George once said he woke up because he felt Peppa standing beside his bed, watching him. But when he opened his eyes, she was lying down, completely still and silent. On the third day, the whole house grew quiet. Too quiet. Even normal sounds, closing doors, clinking dishes, Footsteps seemed muffled. The radio wouldn't play. The TV had no sound, just a dull hum in the ears. Daddy Pig noticed that Peppa had started leaving notes to communicate. They were short. "I'm here. I'm not gone. Can you hear me?" But her eyes told a different story. They looked distant, like something inside her was fading. On the 5th day, she didn't get up. George woke to find her bed neatly made, her clothes folded on the chair. A single note rested on her pillow. "This is all that's left of my voice." Peppa was gone. No sound, no goodbye, no trace. The house fell into true silence. No laughter, no echoes. Even the wind outside seemed to stop. Sometimes George looks at her empty bed and whispers, "Peppa." And in the stillness, if you listen closely, you can almost hear. Peppa Pig, Dark Water. It started in the morning. Daddy Pig went to wash up and noticed something strange. Thick black water was coming out of the bathroom tap. It smelled faintly of smoke. At first, he thought it was just dirty pipes, but the blackness wouldn't wash away, not even with soap. Later that day, the black water appeared in the kitchen. It dripped steadily from the faucet, leaving behind oily streaks in the sink. Peppa noticed dark circles under Mummy Pig's eyes, as if she hadn't slept, though she acted like everything was fine. George became quiet. Daddy Pig stopped making jokes. That night, the room Peppa and George shared felt damp. There were no pipes there, no taps, but the air was heavy and wet. The window fogged from the inside. Drops gathered on the glass. The wallpaper began peeling at the corners. A thin black line crept in from under the bedroom door, as though water had seeped in from elsewhere. The next morning, George's skin looked darker, as if he'd gotten dirty, but it wouldn't wash off. His eyes were dim. He sat still, staring at nothing. Mummy Pig darkened first. Her pink skin turned gray, then nearly black. She tried to smile, but her mouth didn't move. By midday, she was gone. No one saw her leave. She simply wasn't there anymore. Only a damp trail remained in the hallway, leading toward the bathroom. Daddy Pig turned black by evening. He stood by the window, black tears slowly dripping from his eyes. Peppa watched from behind the door. He turned to look at her, but said nothing. A moment later, he vanished. His glasses were left on the windowsill, next to a stain that wouldn't dry, wouldn't soak in, wouldn't fade. George disappeared during the night. Peppa woke to silence. His bed was empty, his pillow damp. Beside it were tiny wet hoofprints. The bedroom door was slightly open. A thin black trail stretched from it into the dark hall. But where it led, no one could tell. Peppa was alone. She didn't cry. She simply stood in front of the mirror, watching as her hooves turned gray, then black. A moist shadow crept across her forehead. Her veins were dark. She felt no fear, only exhaustion. By morning, the house was empty. The taps were dry, every mirror fogged over. In Peppa's bedroom, one final message had been written by a finger in the window's condensation. "Now we live under the skin." The surrender of shadows. One evening, the pig family returned home after a long walk in the forest. The house was unusually quiet, as if everything had stopped. There was an odd silence in the air, and the shadows outside the window looked long and distorted. The temperature in the house felt cold despite the warmth outside. Everything around them seemed to have lost its brightness. Peppa entered her room and immediately noticed that her toys on the shelf were turned upside down, and some of them looked strange. Their eyes were dull, and their expressions had become grim. When she touched one of the toys, her fingers passed right through it, as if it were nothing more than mist. Peppa felt her unease growing, and as she turned around, one of the shadows on the wall began to move, stretching as if it were following her. She quickly left her room and headed toward her parents. But when she entered their bedroom, they appeared strangely calm. Mama Pig was sitting motionless in a chair, and Daddy Pig stood by the window, staring into the dark fog outside. Their eyes were empty, and they didn't move, as if they hadn't noticed her presence. Peppa's heart began to race, and she realized that something was wrong in the house. The shadows on the walls started to move, growing longer and darker, as if something in them was coming to life. Peppa hurried downstairs, but the farther she went, the darker the house became. The shadows behind her continued to stretch, swallowing everything around her. She turned to look back and saw one of them, large and ominous, step closer toward her. Peppa tried to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. With every step, she felt her body growing lighter, losing its form, as though she were dissolving into the shadows. The monstrous black spots rushed to engulf the space around her. Peppa tried to scream, but no sound came from her throat, only deep silence absorbed by the darkness. Eventually, she felt herself disappear. Her body became invisible, and the house empty. Everything around her faded into darkness, and Peppa was swallowed by the shadow, becoming part of it. Along with her, her parents and everything that once filled the house with light and life vanished. Left without form, she became a part of that dark space. The next morning, the house remained empty. No trace of the pig family, nothing that could remind anyone of them. The house became abandoned, consumed by the shadow that now ruled it. Anyone passing by noticed only the strange silence emanating from the place. And though years passed, the shadows in that house continued to move, waiting for new souls brave enough to disturb this world.